Continuing with the development of our example website, in this lesson we're going to insert the header and the contact button. So looking at the browser here, basically what we're going to do is the top half of this table cell here with the contact button in it. That's what's called a mail to link. So when you click on this, it would open your mail client and allow you to send an email message. It's the simplest form of a contact button. So let's get started. We have here our beginning HTML and our beginning CSS, and this is in the O3 contact folder of the Chapter 9 exercise files. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to save as, and we'll save as heading.html. This way we don't overwrite our exercise files. And do the same thing with the CSS. Save that as main.css. because that's the name that gets used here in the XHTML. And now we'll go ahead and enter some content in here. We're going to create the outer table, and we're going to create the table cell for the contact button. So this table tag has an ID attribute, and that creates a CSS ID selector. I like to close my containers when I start them. So this row has one cell in it, so I've opened it and closed it. And you'll notice that for my selectors, I'm using what's called camel case. And this is actually a very good choice for CSS because CSS doesn't allow dashes, and I happen to be one of those people that dislikes typing underscores. I do it when I have to, and I have to often because other people use them. So I like camel case for CSS. And it allows me to have several words, have very nice descriptive selectors. And so camel case usually uses a lowercase to begin, and it uses uppercase letters at the beginnings of second and subsequent words. So I have outer table, I have contact button, and this is what's called camel case. Go ahead and create a div. We'll talk about all this organization in a moment here. And the anchor tag. I'm ending my anchor tag on the second line, and that allows me to put it right up against the image, and we talked about that in our chapter on images. And you'll notice I inserted a width and height attributes for the image. And I have those numbers already because all these assets were given to me, so I have those in my notes. It's a really good idea to always include the width and height if you can. It allows the browser to lay out the page before it downloads the assets from the server so that the page loads without blinking and moving things around as it goes along. It's just a nicety. And I closed the image on the next line and closed the anchor right after it, so there's no space between the image tag and the anchor either at the beginning or the end. Now, as we create our CSS, you'll see that I'm able to select this div specifically without it having a name, and I'll show you how we do that in the CSS. Let's go ahead and enter some of our CSS here. So again, it's a section for the contact button, and I've got another section before that for the outer table. So first the outer table. So that's the selector for the outer table. And it has a margin 0 auto. And again, we have two values. So the first value is the top and bottom, and the second value is the right and left. Selecting auto for right and left, that centers the table on the page. And so this is what creates this effect here, with it being right up against the top, but centered horizontally on the page. And that's from having margin 0 and auto like that. 770 pixels wide, which is the width of all of those images that are used to create the look. And this creates the image at the top of the page. So let's save this and take a look at the page over here. This image up here is actually the background image for that header table cell. And this FFF is the background color for the whole rest of that outer table. So you'll see that all of this white here is as a result of that. And now let's go ahead and enter the contact button. There's our contact button selector, which we typed in the XHTML. So that height is actually half the height of the image. That image at the head of the table there is 110 pixels high, and so 55 is half of that, because the top half of it is what we're using for that contact button. The bottom half we'll do in our next lesson for the menu there. So this is how we select that div. Remember, we put a div in the HTML here that's inside of the contact button. The selector of having the contact button ID selector followed by the div tag selector, that means that this is any div inside of that ID selector. So any divs inside of this, which is here and here, which is this and this, will be selected by that combination selector. It's a hierarchical selector where we have the contact button and then div. So that's any div inside of the context of that contact button selector. 30 pixels is the height of that image. This is a margin that basically says no margin, top, right, bottom, and 650 pixels to the left, so that will move it in 650 pixels. And it'll be against the top of the table cell because we have our default set to vertical align top over here. And padding equals 0. And then finally, the contact button image itself. So again, this is a hierarchical selector that selects any image inside of that contact button context, which is just the one image. And we'll set its margins to 0 and its border to none, so it won't get highlighted by the anchor tag around it. So that is our CSS. We'll go ahead and load it in the browser and see what it looks like. And so we'll drag heading.html into the browser. And you'll see that top half of the image is visible because that's the only table cell that we've defined. And there's our contact button. So by having our table cell just be 55 pixels high, we're only seeing the top half of the image there in the browser. If we were to just make this 110 pixels, we'd see the whole header image. See, there it is. But we need to make it just half as high so we can make the next table cell for the other half for the menu. Save that. And there we're done. That is our contact button. In the next lesson, we'll do the main menu.